your whole news feed. So I encourage you to think about that. Let me give you two very specific applications for Acts 18. The first one is this: choose to live, work, and influence at the crossroads of our culture. Choose to live, work, and influence at the crossroads of our culture. And what I mean by that is this. Let me show you the map again. Can you go back to the map? Yeah. This was the crossroads of the Roman world. If you went from Egypt to Rome, you'd go through Corinth or Asia Minor or Israel. Paul chose to leave Athens and go to the crossroads of the Roman world at the time. Because Corinth was multicultural. It was a melting pot. It was filled with sin. It was filled with terrible sexual sin. But he didn't flee from there. He ran towards it. He left the freedom of Athens and ran towards the sin-filled city. He didn't run away from it. He ran toward it. So let me tell you Paul's strategy when it came to the sin-filled city of Corinth. It was this. Paul's strategy was not to run from a sinful city to a different place. Paul's strategy was to run toward a sinful city and live a different way. Paul's strategy was not to run from a sinful city to a safer place. Paul's strategy was to run toward a sinful city and live a different way. Paul wanted to live at the crossroads of the culture. See, the easiest thing for Christians to do is to segregate themselves away from the rest of the culture because it's safer when you're with a bunch of Christ followers. And just it's more comfortable, especially if you have children. Because the number one job we have as parents is to raise children who know God and learn to love Him. And we think, man, it's dangerous. If we live in the crossroads of an immoral culture, that's dangerous. It is. But I want to suggest that trying to live exclusively with other Christ followers is also dangerous. It's easier to segregate yourself from society in a safe environment, but it's not the gospel way. And you got to figure this out. How does this work for you and your family? And I'm not, we could talk about schooling. Everybody has strong opinions on schooling. And I really don't want to get into that debate. I'm really just thinking about you as someone who lives in this culture. Are you choosing to try to exclude yourself into a safe environment, running away from the sinful society around you, or are you like Paul running towards it and living differently in that sinful environment? Instead of running from, it's running towards. It's living at the crossroads instead of fleeing to the corner. My wife, when her parents came to Christ, they went away to school and came back and became a pastor at the church where they became to know Christ. And my wife, in her growing up years then, lived on the location of the church building. They had homes and duplexes and even this 2 or 3 story apartment building that all the staff lived in and their families. It was a church back then when I was dating her in college of 700, 800, 900, maybe 1,000 people. Now it might be 100 or 200 people. And they lived on this location, and it was safe because they were with Christians all the time. They went to this private Christian school on the grounds where they would never have to leave except to go to the grocery store if they didn't want to. It was safe, and it was fun, and it was safe. I don't know, God has called us to be safe. They even called it a compound. I'm not sure that's the best word. God's called us to be lights, to engage with people far from Christ, to have genuine friendship with them, whether or not they ever embrace Christ, but to influence them and show them how life is lived fully in love with God. You see, we can impress people from a distance, but we can only influence them up close. Sometimes Christians get the idea if we segregate ourselves in our own little culture, then people will look over the fence at us and admire us. No, it's like the zoo. They come just to watch you because they think you're weird. And you have less impact. You see, Corinth was the center of commerce in the Roman world, the center of religion, a center of immorality, a center of politics because it was the capital of that region. And Paul didn't run from that. He ran toward it. He left the freedom of Athens for the need of Corinth. Even in Israel, in ancient times, even before the New Testament days, God placed Israel exactly where He placed Israel because at that time it was the crossroads of the world. If you were in Egypt or you were in Assyria, you had to pass through Israel to attack each other, to trade. God put His people at the crossroads of the world, and over in the Old Testament, He says, so that the world will know, so that the world will know. He placed them there for that reason, and Paul goes to Corinth for the same reason. And Paul spent 18 months there, and he didn't urge Christians to get out. He urged them to stay, to live for Christ there, to love people there, to influence an ungodly culture there, not live in some bubble, not live trying to protect protect your own Christian little circle, but to influence and live at the crossroads. In the first century, you want to live at the crossroads, you went through Corinth, or you lived in Corinth. And I want to suggest in the United States of America, the crossroads is no longer a location. Because of the ease of travel and because of the ease of communication, the crossroads of our world is wherever you are. And Paul was called a tent maker because he literally made tents. In our culture, people that are missionaries that have a job, a second job, they're called tent makers because they're really there to help lead people to Jesus. That's the ultimate goal they have, is let people see the beauty of who Jesus is. But they have a job. Can I suggest that all of us should look at ourselves as tent makers? Whatever job you have, that is not your ultimate task. Your ultimate task is to live the beauty of Jesus in the world around you and to share the beauty of Jesus with others around you. In our culture, there's some crossroads that Christians have powerful influence. I think one of the most powerful influences Christians have in our culture is professional athletics. In professional football, there's more committed Christians in professional football by ratio than there is in the rest of American culture. Same with professional baseball, those two professional sports. For whatever reason, Christians have looked at professional athletics as a great place for Christians to live at the crossroads of the world, and many committed Christians do it well. But can I tell you where the ratio of Christians is lower than almost anywhere else in America? It's called Hollywood. And Christians, rather than running to the darkness, have fled from it. Do you know where there's not enough committed Christ followers? In Washington, D.C. And instead of running to the darkness that is often politics, Christians have run from it. You know how few Christians live in the world of high finance in New York City? Instead of running towards that place that can really mess you up, Christians tend to run away from it. And I want to suggest we need a group of Christians, a generation of Christ followers, that don't look at the ultimate job of being a pastor or a missionary, as great as that is, but they look at the ultimate job as going into a career where they can live at the crossroads of society and live and know and love Jesus and live and know and love people to Jesus. Whatever career that is. So I want to urge you.